Good morning, I am Giovanni Carmine Costabile, and today I will tell you about the beloved and Lúthien Tinúviel, Erotic Epiphany in Tolkien and Lévinas. The artwork is by Lady of the Flower. This presentation is a development of my forthcoming monograph, The Mirror of Desire Unbidden, Retrieving the Imago Dei in Tolkien and Late Medieval English Literature, which is going to be published by Peter Lang International Academic Publishers. Georgia Petridou, in her 2016 book on Divine Epiphany in the Ancient Greek World, wrote, I quote, "The term erotic epiphany refers to narratives or amorous liaisons between divinities and humans, whether gods and mortal women, goddesses and mortal men, or homosexual relationships such as the abductions of Ganymede by Zeus and Pelops by Poseidon. Narratives that relate the erotic epiphanies of male deities to mortal women generally follow two different scenarios. A god seduces a married woman, usually the wife of a king, priest, military leader, or another person of authority, often assuming the likeness of her husband. Or a god seduces a virgin of distinguished parentage, often the daughter of a king. Narratives that relate the sexual union of a female goddess with a mortal male, on the other hand, most commonly recount the erotic abduction of a handsome youth by a goddess, such as that of Tithonus by Eos, or the seduction by means of persuasion and or deception of a beautiful young man described as godlike by a goddess." End quote. Considering the seduction of a beautiful mortal by a goddess, I think that this description applies quite well to what happens to Beren when he meets Lúthien, because in the Silmarillion we read, I quote, "Wandering in the summer in the woods of Doriath, he came upon Lúthien, daughter of Thingol and Melian, at the time of evening under moonrise, as she danced upon the unfading grass in the glades beside the Skalduvin. Then all memories of his pain departed from him, and he fell into an enchantment." End quote. It is important to stress how Lúthien is described as the daughter of Melian, because Melian is actually a goddess, and she is defined as divine in the Lay of Lúthien, and always in the Lay of Lúthien, Lúthien is described as the daughter of the Deathless Queen, and half elven and half divine. Also in the Silmarillion, we read when Lúthien enchants Karkaroth into sleep, that suddenly some power descended from of old from divine race possessed Lúthien. And when Melian leaves Doriath, Melian is described as one of the divine race of the Valar. At the very ending of the Silmarillion, Elrond and Elros are told to come from the strain of the spirits divine that were before Arda, because they were the sons of Dior's daughter, Lúthien's son, child of Thingol and Melian. When Tolkien describes Melian, who was called Wendeling in the Book of Lost Tales, he gets extraordinarily physical in his description of her, because usually Tolkien does not stress the physical features of his characters, but in the case of Melian Gwendoling, he does. And this is important because it is functional to her enchantment of Thingol. She is described as slender, dark of hair, her skin was white and pale, and her eyes shone. She's called a sprite, but this should be seen as a way of saying that she is a fae or a goddess. And nightingales sing about her as she went. This, of course, implies that Lúthien is divine too. And in fact, Claire Moore in 2022 rightly pointed out how she bears a strong resemblance to Monmouth Morgan, with Morgan Le Fay in the Arthurian legend, and Morgan is called Morgan the Goddess in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and Tolkien, of course, was aware of this. In the Book of Lost Tales, also Tinúviel is described in a very physical way. She is the most beautiful of all the maidens of the hidden elves, and as she dances, her bare white feet are twinkling among the emerald stems, and she is like a spatter of moonlight shimmering through the leaves upon the floor. Her hair is dark, like her mother's, and it is described as dark and finer than the most delicate threads of twilight. Also in the Lay of Lúthien, Tolkien gets very physical in his description of her. He describes her lissom limbs. He calls her a fair maid, who has grey eyes, dark hair, and light feet. And he also points out how great are her beauty, her blissfulness, her glory, and her loveliness. And again, in the Lay of Lúthien, there are more passages where he gets physical in his description of her, and he says that her arms are ivory and gleaming, her hair is like a cloud streaming, and her feet a twinkle roaming. And as Beren sees her, is enchanted dumb, yet filled with fire of such a wonder and desire that all his mortal mind was dim. In another passage, when Lúthien falls in love with Beren, starlight trembles in her eyes, and she's called the more fairer than any child of man, and the loveless maid of elfiness. She has again lissom limbs and shadowy hair, and her hands are white pale. There is also another passage where she has lissom arms, shining eyes, tender lips, and an enchanted voice. In the Silmarillion, this is not contradicted, even though the narrative is considerably shorter, because Lúthien is the most beautiful of all the children of Ilúvatar. Her eyes are grey, her hair is dark, and there is again a stress on her glory and her loveliness, and that in her face there is a shining light. Lúthien's song is magical, because it releases the bonds of winter and brings spring. We may notice how there is considerable stress placed on Lúthien's feet in praise of them throughout all these passages, and particularly in the Lay of Lúthien there are 7 occurrences of praise of Lúthien's feet, in lines 416, 520, 30, 701, 732, 776, 794, and 832. Now, feet are often a euphemism for the sexual parts, and this can be seen in medieval literature in the episode of Queen Langweth, the Adulteress, that is told by Joycelyn the Monk of Furness in the Acta Sanctorum. Queen Langweth should not repeat her sin, and after she is told that she should not sin again, she restrained her feet from another such fall, I quote. Now, Emmanuel Lévinas wrote a book titled Totality and Infinity, and there is a section in this book that is called the Phenomenology of Eros. And there he points out that, I quote, love aims at the other, it aims at him in his frailty. And love is to fear for another, to come to the assistance of his frailty. And in another quote, in this frailty, as in the dawn, rises the loved, who is the beloved. Now, even though Lévinas' perspective may be considered to be male-centered, it is a very good description of the unfolding of erotic experience. For example, in another passage he says, an epiphany of the loved, the feminine is not added to an object and a Tao antecedently given or encountered in the neuter, because the epiphany of the beloved is but one with a gem of tenderness. In erotic love, one experiences the eternal feminine, because he writes, I quote, the beloved, at once graspable but intact in her nudity, beyond object and subject, and thus beyond the existent, abides in virginity. The feminine, essentially inviolable, the eternal feminine, is the virgin or a continuous recommencement of virginity, the untouchable in the very moment of voluptuosity, future in the present. End quote. When Lévinas observes how love is connected to frailty and comes in the assistance of frailty, and that in frailty rises the loved who is the beloved, this is consistent with Tolkien's description of Tinúviel in the Book of Lost Tales, because she is repeatedly called Little One, Little Maid, Little Bird, Little Tinúviel, and she even calls herself Little Dancer. She's called Little One by one Melian. Tevildo's doorkeeper calls her Little Maid, and she's called Little Bird by Tevildo and Little Tinúviel by Beren. Also in the Lay of Lúthien, there is a passage where none else than Thu himself says, I quote, heard ye not then of that pretty fay of Lúthien? Her body is fair, very white and fair, little Lúthien. Ah, little Lúthien, what brought the foolish flight who have sought? End quote. So, even Thu observes how Lúthien is frail and tender, or at least she appears so. When Lévinas writes that the epiphany of the beloved is but one with a regime of tenderness, this is also consistent with Tolkien, because Tolkien repeatedly mentions the tender name of Tinúviel in the Lay of Lúthien. That is the tender name of nightingales in the Elvish tongue, Tinúviel, and the tender name that nightingales were called of old, Tinúviel, in another passage. And always in the Lay of Lúthien, Lúthien's lips are called tender lips, and her face is a starlit face of tenderness, crowned by the stars of elfiness. This is a passage from the original text of the Lay of Lúthien. When in the Book of Lost Tales, Tinúviel enchants Melko into sleep in his halls, she is called magically beautiful, and her dance brings to Melko and his court deep dreams of all that their ill hearts desired. She sang in a voice very low and wonderful, a song that she had been told by Gwendolen, her mother, the goddess. And there was the voice of nightingales in it, and never has any voice or sight of such beauty again been seen there. So Tinúviel enchants Melko because of her magic, of the divine nature of her mother, but also because she is tender, like nightingales. And this is confirmed in the Silmarillion, when she is stripped of her disguise as a bat, and he bends his gaze upon her, and by looking upon her beauty, he conceives in his thought an evil lust, a design more dark than any that yet come into his heart. And he takes secret pleasure in his thoughts. And then she sings a song of such surpassing loveliness and of such blinding power that he listens perforce. This is again consistent with both the erotic and the tender. In the Book of Lost Tales, even in the passage where Tinúviel goes to Mandos, her tenderness is again stressed. In both versions, actually, both in the version where it is the magic of Tinúviel's tender kisses that heals Beren without her going to Mandos, but only calling his spirit from there. And in the version that is told by Veane to be true, where it is Lúthien or Tinúviel in this version who goes to Mandos to retrieve his spirit, and their beauty and tender loveliness even touch the cold heart of Mandos. In a prayer that is not specifically told to be a song in this version, but we may assume it is so. In the Silmarillion, this is also confirmed, because her beauty was more than the beauty of anybody else who was in Mandos, and her sorrow was deeper than their sorrows. And she sings to him, and Mandos is moved to pity. So again, this is because the tenderness of Tinúviel brings about the epiphany of the beloved in all cases. When Beren falls in love with her by seeing her dancing, when Morgoth sees her dancing, and when Mandos hears her song. Thank you.